and welcome to 5-Minute Family Law. Today's episode is the first of 3 episodes dealing with separation. It's a big topic. Today's episode is going to talk about separation in terms of how the court knows you've gotten separated, the impact of separation in terms of claims for divorce, and the impact of the date of separation on unmarried spouses' ability to make claims for the division of property and the payment of spousal support. The next episode is going to talk about separation and property rights, specifically how the date of separation stops the accumulation of family property and family debt, and how it vests an undivided one-half interest in all family property as a tenant in common on both spouses. That's a very important episode that you're not going to want to miss. The third and final episode about separation is going to talk about the emotional aspects of separation. It's going to talk about how you build, establish, and maintain boundaries between yourself and your ex. It's going to talk about maintaining each other's privacy after the date of separation, and it's going to provide a bunch of really helpful do's and don'ts about separation and the uncoupling process. Despite how important separation can be from a family law context, it's actually something that's really easy to accomplish. All that's required is for one person to reach the decision that the relationship is over, that it can't be salvaged, say as much to the other person involved in the relationship, and then behave as if the relationship is over. In British Columbia, there's no such thing as a legal separation or an official separation. You don't need to go see a judge, a lawyer, a priest, a rabbi, or an imam in order to get officially separated. There's no such thing. All you have to do is decide that the relationship is over, say so, and then behave as if the relationship is actually over. In fact, the British Columbia Family Law Act says almost nothing about separation. What it does say appears at Section 3. And it says, for the purposes of this act, spouses may be separated despite continuing to live in the same home, and the court may consider as evidence of separation communication by one spouse to the other of an intention to separate permanently and an action taken by a spouse that demonstrates the spouse's intention to separate permanently. So the one thing that's really important about that section is the bit about being separated despite continuing to live in the same home. The reality about separation is that, living together is cost effective. The reality is that when a couple are living together, they've got one income, maybe 2 incomes, but together that income is only paying for one rent or mortgage, one hydro bill, one gas bill, one grocery bill, and so on. And when a couple separates, well, the same amount of income now has to cover 2 rent bills, 2 mortgages, 2 gas bills, 2 electricity bills, 2 phone bills, and so on and so forth. And so some people, no matter how difficult it is, make the decision that they're actually going to stay at home instead of moving out when they separate. And according to the Family Law Act, that's all right. You just have to have communicated your intention to separate permanently and then behaved as if the relationship is over. Now, what it means when you say that a relationship is over and that you're behaving that way is that the marriage-like quality of the relationship is broken down. And so what that usually means is that the couple have stopped sharing the same bed, they've stopped having sex with each other, they've stopped doing chores like laundry, dishes, and making meals for each other, they don't go out together as a couple, their friends and their family think that they've separated. That's really all that's involved. It's ending the marriage-like quality of the relationship. The date of separation is important for a number of reasons, and in this episode we're going to talk about separation in terms of getting divorced and the date of separation in terms of the ability of unmarried couples to make certain claims under the Provincial Family Law Act. So, starting with divorce, you'll recall from a past episode that there is only one reason why the court will make a divorce order, namely that you have proven to the judge that your marriage has broken down. But there are 3 reasons why your marriage may have broken down, one of which is that you and your spouse have lived separate and apart for at least 1 year. Now, under the Federal Divorce Act, just like under the Provincial Family Law Act, you can actually live separate and apart while continuing to cohabit under the same roof. What's important, though, is that you've communicated to your spouse that the relationship is over, that it can't be salvaged, and that you have, in fact, lived as if your relationship is broken down. Now, It can happen, and often does happen, however, that married spouses will sometimes move back in together in an attempt to reconcile during that 1 year period of separation. So the question often happens, well, what does that do to the clock on that 1 year period? Well, Section 8 of the Divorce Act says that for the purposes of spouses living separate and apart, the 1 year period will not be considered to have been interrupted or terminated by reason only that the spouses have resumed cohabitation during a period of or periods totaling not more than 90 days with reconciliation as its primary purpose. Now, that classic bit of legal gobbledygook essentially boils down to the idea that you and your spouse can live together with the intention of getting back together for a total period of up to 90 days within that 1 year period of separation without the clock starting over again. So if it doesn't work out, that's it. You can continue to get divorced as planned based on the original date of separation. However, if you've lived together for more than 90 days, well, the clock starts all over again, and it begins again on the date that you have last lived together. In other words, the date of the date of the last separation. The date of separation can have an important impact on the ability of unmarried spouses to make claims for the division of property or the payment of spousal support. Section 198 of the Family Law Act says that a spouse may start a proceeding for an order for the division of family property, the allocation of responsibility for family debt, or the payment of spousal support no later than 2 years after, in the case of spouses who were living in a marriage-like relationship, the date the spouses separated. That's really important because the 2 year period for married couples begins to run on the date they get divorced. But for unmarried spouses, the date starts earlier. It starts on the date that you separated. And if you don't bring a claim for the division of property, the allocation of responsibility for debt, or the payment of support within that 2 year window, you may not be able to make that claim at all. However, there's an important exception. Section 198 also says, the running of the time limits is suspended during any period in which persons are engaged in family dispute resolution with a family dispute resolution professional. And what that means is that the running of that 2 year period stops temporarily while you're engaged in a process of mediation, arbitration, or collaborative negotiation. But it's important to understand that the pause button doesn't get hit just because you've said, let's mediate. You need to be actually involved in the process. It has to be a serious, ongoing process. And if it's not serious, if you're not actively engaged, the clock will simply keep on running. And so today, we've talked about how to separate, the fact that in British Columbia there is no such thing as a legal separation. We've talked about the importance of separation as the beginning of the running of the 1 year period when married spouses are claiming that their marriage has broken down based on separation. And we've talked about the importance of the date of separation for unmarried spouses and their ability to make claims for the payment of spousal support and the division of property and debt. In the next episode, we're going to talk more about the impact of the date of separation on property issues. Specifically, we're going to talk about how the date of separation is the date when each spouse in a married or unmarried spousal relationship gets an undivided 1/2 interest in all family property as a tenant in common. And that's really important.